Hello and welcome. This is a video to help you set up your Windows computer for software development, specifically for the Python coding we're going to be doing in Biddle Bootcamp. For this video, I'm targeting people who are not sophisticated, who are new to programming, who've maybe only done coding in a browser on something like Codecademy or SoloLearn. And the goal of this is to help you get a little development environment, meaning like a terminal. That's like something where you can execute commands to move files around or to run code or things like that. And a text editor, a separate program that that is used to write code and to edit code. That's why we call it a text editor, because code is basically text. And so in order to get started, I have this little Google Doc here. It'll be linked in the video description. And so we're just going to run through a couple steps. And at the bottom, I have some resources that I encourage you to check out if you kind of want to understand what's going on a little better. And I'll get to those later. But first off, let's do the first thing. Let's install the Visual Studio Code, VS Code text editor. And so if you look at this directions, and by the way, these might change a little bit by the time you watch the video. It could, I'm going to edit them as I go a little. So we're on Windows, so we don't want the links for other operating systems. We want the Windows link. And so you see it starts downloading, and it leaves us in the documentation. And you can see that it has a lot of stuff going on here. There's user guides, different languages. These are all kinds of different, here's like a debugger, here's a Python thing. These are different extensions that are available for Visual Studio Code. This is one of the nice things about Visual Studio Code is created by Microsoft. And so one of the nice things about it is that it's extremely well supported, and it's good for beginners and pros. So this is what I encourage you to use. There's 20 good text editors, and so I'm just going to use this one as an example if you don't have a favorite. So if you like PyCharm or something, you can go ahead and try that. But I think unless you have a real strong favorite, let's just use this one. And so now that it's done downloading, let's click on it, and it should open up a setup wizard. Here we go, the good old-fashioned Microsoft setup wizard, which hasn't changed at all in as long as I've been alive. So we'll just say next, just accept everything. See, it's quite a large, 180 megabytes, kind of a large program here. Just say yes, yes, just accept the defaults all over the place. And so now that it's done installing, we'll say finish, and it should open it up for us. Here we go, a brand new, fresh installation of Visual Studio Code. And so the first thing I want to do, before I teach you how how you can create files and edit files and stuff, the thing I want you to do is go hit this terminal button. And let's say new terminal. So this is going to be the program that allows us to execute our code. And this is where we're going to be, when we get further on in the Digital Cash project, this is where we will be running our little mini Bitcoin. And this is where we will be running our crawler and our initial block downloader. And this is roughly where we will, it's still a little up in the air how we're going to do the hardware wallet on Windows, but this is roughly what we're going to be doing on Windows. So you can choose which program is used, which shell the word is called, and in the description here, let me see. I don't want Twitter. I want this one. In the description here, I encourage you to watch this. What is a shell and what is a terminal versus a shell? They describe it much better than I can. And so after you watch that, I'll let you know that you can choose your shell program, and PowerShell is the default one for Windows. There's actually another one called CMD, which is kind of a crappy version. But honestly, PowerShell is kind of crappy too. In general, people use this thing called Bash. Bash is what's used on Unix computers, meaning Linux and Mac OS. And so I'm going to be using Bash in this video series, in this course, and I encourage you to use it too. I think it's just a little bit more accessible to beginners and a little bit more powerful. It's a better place to start. And so in order so what we're going to want to do is we want to get bash in here. And so in order to do that, let's hop back over. As we said, we want to use bash. In order to do that, we need to just install this thing called the Ubuntu Windows Linux subsystem. And basically what this is it's a fancy thing that allows you to run Linux inside of Windows, a thing that people once thought was impossible because these two used to be the worst enemies, but now it's actually come to pass because there are many situations where a Windows computer can be convenient because you have this nice graphical interface, you got all these great programs, but sometimes you want to have a terminal that's Linux because that's where Linux really shines, is on the terminal in the execution of programs and doing things on the command line. It's not so great for the graphical interface stuff. So if you check this out, just click on that link. And so if you read this, it says the first thing we need to do is we need to open PowerShell as an administrator and run this command. And so in order to do this, you'll want to go and type power. You can type power in here and it'll bring up PowerShell. And if you right click, you'll see this run as administrator option. And then I'll say, hey, do you really want to do this? And I'll say, yeah, of course I do. And so what we want is, and by the way, you can hit Alt Tab to go back and forth between your programs. That's a good thing. So we want to copy this, and all this says is basically enable the Windows feature called Microsoft Windows Linux Subsystem Linux. They got such a confusing, wordy name here. But we want to do that. And for me, it says restart needed false. I don't need to do a restart. If it says restart needed true there, or it tells you to restart your computer, go ahead, restart your computer, and then finish the video after you've done what the computer says to. And once you've done that, I'm pretty sure we're done. Yeah, we can close PowerShell. So just as a little hint, so this PowerShell here is actually the same program that was running down here. It's a shell and it can run in a couple different contexts. And so yeah, then all we need to do is we go down here and we open the Microsoft Windows Store. You just type Windows Store. And so we'll just go and type Ubuntu. And so this is probably what you want. I installed this previously, so that's probably why it's saying owned. We want this one 18.04. There's probably not much of a difference if you install the two. Yeah, so let's just say git. And this UI is kind of glitchy in Microsoft. In my opinion, everything's kind of glitchy over here. But you'll see in the rest of the videos I'm always using Linux, and I'm using like the hardest core Linux you can kind of get. It's called Arch Linux. It was what all the super nerds used. And then I use this thing called i3. It's a window manager that allows you to basically never have to use a mouse because I'm kind of a minimalist and I think that's cool. So now that we have it installed, let's hit launch. And this will take a second because it's basically installing a new operating system inside your operating system. And again, we're doing all this in order to get access to this wonderful, beautiful thing called Bash. And so it'll ask you to basically set up your user in this thing. And so I'm just gonna it'll ask you to set up your username in here. So I'm just gonna give it my same username, Justin. And so it asks you a password here to set a password. I just recommend using the same exact password that you use for the rest of your machine. And so it asks you to do it again. And it'll say password set successfully. And so now what we have here is a Bash terminal. And so now that we have this set up, we're actually not going to use it here. We're going to use it over here in Visual Studio. So let's go back to Visual Studio. And if you hit Control-Shift-P, this opens up what's called like the command palette, I think it's called. This allows you to basically just search for different commands you want. And so what we want here is actually, it already shows up, terminal select default shell. And so this gives us a couple, this is command prompt. This is like the most basic Windows one. PowerShell is like the advanced Windows one. And what we want is this WSL bash, Windows Subsystem Linux Bash. And so if we click that, give it a little second. And notice how the slashes go down to the right here. Once we see how now the slashes go up to the right. See how they're kind of different. The slashes go down. It basically prints out where you are on the computer. See how the slashes go in the other direction. So it's like you're in a completely different world here now, where even locations on your file system are represented differently. These are this is like the Linux way of doing things, the Unix or Mac OS way of doing things. This is like the Windows way of doing things. And so we're going to want to hit the garbage button here because PowerShell is trash. And so I'm sure that will piss some people off, but I bet they won't watch this video. Now that we have a bash terminal set up here, that's quite an achievement. Give yourself a pat on the back. Let's hop back over to our instructions. And so we basically have these three all accomplished. And so now what we need to do is we need to install Python 3. And basically, to upgrade the state of this little Linux terminal that we have sitting here. So if you just type Python 3 and enter, it does give us a Python 3. That's pretty good. So let's see, does it give us pip? And so yeah, we don't have pip, and we have ven. Yep, we don't have venv either. So I'm gonna update these a little bit. But the first thing we're gonna do is let's do this first command, sudo apt update. This will basically go and download from the package manager that's used on Ubuntu called apt all the basically newest version. It'll go and find out what is the newest version of all the software I currently have installed. It won't update any software. It'll just figure out what we have, what is outdated of the software that we have. And this is just in this little Linux world. It's not the greater Windows world on your computer. So you can say sudo apt update, and this will ask you for the password that we just created a couple minutes ago when we created this Ubuntu subsystem. And once you give it that, it'll go. See, it's going checking all these websites for these different packages, and so it's I don't really know why it's like this, but when you set up one of these Linux Ubuntu Linux subsystems, the software is woefully out of date, and so when you get it started, it takes a little while to download all the updates, and so for me, this is kind of a UX fail from Windows perspective. It's like, why do they give you such out-of-date software? I don't know, but you know, this is similar to what you do on any Linux. Anytime you create a Linux server or something, usually the first thing you do is you got to go get the software updates, because so the people who maintain these things are never don't rest, it seems. And so after we do that, we'll look back over here, and the next thing we want to do is sudo apt upgrade. And so this will actually go and install the changes that that update found we needed. And so it'll say, okay, we're going to need 57 megabytes, and this is all the things we're going to change. And so these are like very low. These are the like foundational. Here's like OpenSSL, Python 3. These are some very like foundational apt. This is the package manager itself. These are the packages that are kind of the base layer of this little Linux operating system we have that lives inside Windows. And let's say yes to that. And again, downloading more stuff. And this will take a while. Looks like we got a 1 minute and 40-second ETA. So I'll just probably fast forward through this. And so now, if we want just to understand what we did, I'll just show you, like, to access the things we just installed. You type Python 3-m and pip. So this will just say I want Python to run its pip program. -m means module. So I want Python 3 to run pip. And so it'll just, since we didn't give it a command, it'll just give us sort of a help menu. And so if we type in venv, it will do the same thing. It will give us a less verbose help menu. And now that we've got all that installed, we're ready to actually, now that we got all that installed, we can jump to this and finish the digital cache setup directions. And this is something that we start to cover in the first video, the PNG coin video. This is in this one. So, you know, this is kind of, I'm going to cover it twice here a little bit, but so if we hop over here, just again hit this link here, we will see some setup instructions, and we already got git. If you can't type git in the terminal, sorry, if git doesn't give you some sort of an output like this, you can do sudo apt install git-all. If it doesn't seem that Git is on your computer, but I think it should be. And so next, create a GitHub account if you don't have one. Just click this link. We just spent a lot of time installing Python. It took forever, right? And so the next thing we want to do is just copy and paste. So the next thing we want to do, and finally we want to just copy and paste this whole section. I'll kind of explain briefly what these commands do. But let's go and you just copy and paste them into the terminal. So this first command will download all the code for this project. That's what git clone does. Git clone just downloads files, and Git is a program for basically kind of like sharing. It's for sharing files basically. And so this one will change our directory. It'll move us into the a new directory on our computer. Do you see how in our terminal here, this is the directory we used to be in, and see after we do cd, it changes. You see it's digital cache at the end, and so that we just moved into this code we just downloaded. Next, we do this Python 3-m venv. This creates a thing called a virtual environment. I will explain this in a future video, probably tomorrow. A virtual environment is a separate version, a separate isolated version of Python that you can run on your computer, and it won't conflict with, you can do whatever the hell you want in there, and it won't conflict with your global Python or with any other virtual environments you have. And so it's just, the whole idea of a virtual environment is to isolate different versions of Python so they can use different versions of software and they don't conflict. It's to prevent conflicts. And so then we do this thing called source venv bin activate. This command here created a venv folder in your directory, in your project, and source venv bin activate went and executed this file activate in your shell in bash. And the result of that is you get this pretty little venv in parentheses on the left side of your prompt. This is your prompt. It's everything to the left of where you type on a terminal. For example, this is your username, this is the name of the computer you're on, this is the directory you're on, and this is if you have some sort of like a special environment set up, like a virtual environment in Python. And so after that, we say Python 3-m. Basically, this command just installs a list of requirements that are in this file, and I'm not going to explain how all that works right now. There's some errors that I need to investigate. Okay, so the installation is finally done, and if you hit enter one more time, it will run this Jupyter Notebook command. All this does is it spins up a little web server that runs on this port on your computer, port 8888. And so if you hit, for me it's Control-click, and it'll open it in the browser. And so it opened in another window, so let me open it here. And so all this does is it runs a little web page, and the web page basically allows you to run Python code inside. This is called a Jupyter Notebook. I will explain more thoroughly how to run a Jupyter Notebook in the PNG Coin video, this one here. And in summary, this is a little instruction to just basically how to run Jupyter from scratch now that you have it all set up. The first thing is you want to click this terminal / new terminal button. Remember that was up here, so that was up here. Let me just run this for you. Let me just run through this again, just in case you don't know. You just to do it over from scratch, because you'll have to redo this probably before. You'll just want to be able to repeat this. So the next thing you do is cd digital cache. That just moves you into a new directory, a new folder. And the next thing is you want to do this source venv bin activate. And this will create the little prompt over here on the left side. It'll mean we moved into the virtual environment. And we don't need to do any of the installation or anything else. Now we can just run the Jupyter Notebook. And so there we go. It'll open it up. I'm not going to actually open it. And so you'll notice if we type Jupyter Notebook without, excuse me. And so you'll notice if we deactivate will leave us from the virtual environment. I will explain what this means and how it works tomorrow. But if we deactivate and type Jupyter Notebook, it'll say like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, which is kind of cool. You can see that this virtual environment is actually doing something. As soon as we leave it, it no longer knows what Jupyter Notebook is, right? Which is kind of cool. You can see something magical and mysterious is going on here. And I'll explain this in a future video. So these are all the instructions you need to know to rerun this whole thing. So thanks for listening. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you on Slack.